There's a moment that happens around 6:47 on a Friday. Your phone lights up. Someone wants you out. A dinner, a drink, a thing, and before you've even read the whole text, your whole body has already answered. No. Not tonight. Not this weekend. Maybe not this month. And you're not sad about it. You're relieved. That's the part nobody talks about. I'm Frank, and today we're going to figure out why your house got so quiet and so good at holding you, and why the door out of it keeps getting heavier. Let's start with what you're actually doing, because the behavior is louder than anything you could say about it. On any given day in 2023, the average American spent 18 hours and 12 minutes at home. 18 hours. That's up an hour and 36 minutes from 2006. And here's the part that flips the easy explanation. Only about 25 minutes of that post-2019 increase comes from working from home. So if you've been telling yourself this is all because of the laptop on the dining room table, the numbers don't agree. Something else moved. Socializing fell off a cliff. Time spent socializing has been sliding for 2 decades, and by 2024, only about 30% of people did any socializing at all on a given day, down 8% from a decade earlier. So whatever's going on, it wasn't one event. It was a slow drift, and you drifted with it. But you didn't drift the same way a 25-year-old drifted. You drifted under weight. That's the part I want you to see clearly. Because when people talk about homebody culture, they make it sound cute. Candles, slippers, a cozy blanket, a streaming subscription. What's happening in your house is heavier than that. There's a load-bearing wall made of a human being, and that human being is you. Here's the load. If you're Gen X in your 40s, there's about a 50% chance you're a sandwich generation caregiver right now. In your 50s, it's about 1 in 3. That means you've got a parent who needs something. A ride, a pill organizer, a phone call to the insurance company that takes 90 minutes. And you've got a kid or a young adult who also needs something. Often money, often emotional support. Often a place to crash for a couple weeks that turned into 8 months. Surveys of sandwich generation caregivers put the average around 37 hours a week of unpaid care. That's a second job. 71% are doing it for both generations at once. 63% are living paycheck to paycheck. 18% report being stressed always. Not sometimes, always. Now layer the money on top. 51% of Gen Xers say they're financially stressed. Only 17%, 17, feel very confident about a comfortable retirement. So you're working, you're caregiving, you're funding people on either side of you, and the math at the end of the month keeps coming up short. Now ask yourself a real question. With all of that running in the background of your nervous system, where exactly is the energy supposed to come from to put on real pants, drive 22 minutes, park, walk into a restaurant, perform fine, eat something you didn't choose, and drive home? There isn't any. The tank is empty before you even pick up the phone. The no you keep texting isn't a personality. It's a fuel gauge. And the house, your house, has quietly become the only place that doesn't ask you to perform. The dog doesn't need you to be charming. The couch doesn't ask how the kids are doing. The kitchen doesn't bring up your dad. Home is the one room in your life where the answer to, "How are you?" is allowed to be silence. Staying in is what triage looks like when you're the one carrying everybody. Now let's add the layer almost nobody puts on top of this, because polite society still doesn't want to talk about it. If you're a Gen X woman, there's a very good chance your hormones started shifting somewhere in your late 30s or early 40s, and nobody told you. Perimenopause can start years before your final period. The average age of menopause is 51, and the gap between when symptoms start and when someone actually names what's going on, can stretch for years. So you can spend a near decade feeling like you've been quietly replaced by a stranger who lives in your body, and the medical chart still says nothing's wrong. One of the things this stranger brings with her is social anxiety. Real, clinical, documented social anxiety in midlife women who never had it before. The research is starting to name it: social appearance anxiety, a loss of what the literature actually calls social prestige and withdrawal. You don't want to be looked at. You don't want to be the funny one at the table anymore. You don't want to explain why you're sweating. You don't want to track who's talking, who's listening, who needs a follow-up text. So the invitation comes in. Your body, which is already running on fumes from caregiving and money and sleep that hasn't been good in 3 years, does the math in a millisecond. And the math says, stay home. And again, that's a system protecting itself. Your nervous system is more honest than your calendar. It knows what you can afford. It's been knowing for a while. You feel that? Let's keep going. Before I keep going, I've been working on something on the side. A book called Psychology of Gen X. It gets into a lot of this, the stuff that got wired into you young and what it's doing to you now, the patterns you can't quite explain about yourself. Links in the description if you want to look. And to everyone watching and sharing this stuff, genuinely, thank you. If you want to go a step further, there's a Patreon too. Subscribers get early access to videos with no ads, and you help keep the channel running. That link's right there as well. QR code's on screen. Okay, here's where it gets interesting, because I want to head off the easy story. The easy story is, COVID broke everybody, and now nobody leaves the house. That story is wrong, and the data is pretty blunt about it. In a Harris poll from March 2025, only 31% of Gen X said the pandemic had a very significant impact on their lives. Gen Z was 45%. Millennials, 43%. You, Gen X, were the lowest. Which is funny if you think about it, because you were running the household, the job, and the kids' Zoom school all at once. And you still came out of it going, yeah, it was rough. What's for dinner? So the homebody thing is not pandemic damage for you. The pandemic poured gasoline on something that was already burning. The drift toward home started in the early 2000s and just kept going. Roughly an hour and a half more time at home per day across 2 decades. Shopping went down. Socializing went down. Volunteering went down. Travel outside the home went down. Sleep and at-home computer leisure went up. A whole country slowly turned inward, and you happen to be at the exact age where the turn made the most sense. Because here's the other thing. You were trained for this. Not in the latchkey, key around the neck way people love to roll out. In a more specific way. You were the last group raised before the constant social broadcast. You grew up with a phone attached to a wall and a door you could close behind you. Privacy wasn't a setting. It was just the default. So when the rest of the world started getting louder, more visible, more performative, more post about it or it didn't happen, your gut had a reference point. You remembered when you could just not. And now you're choosing not, constantly. And it feels like coming home to yourself. Here's where I want to be careful, because there's a real line, and you have to know which side of it you're on. The U.S. Surgeon General put out an advisory in 2023 saying about half of American adults reported loneliness. Half. And lacking social connection raises your risk of early death at a level comparable to smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. It's an independent risk factor for heart disease, dementia, and depression. That's mortality data, not a mood. So there's a version of staying home that's restorative. The version where you close the door, the noise stops, your nervous system finally exhales. You sleep, you read, you watch the show, you walk the dog, you cook the thing, and on Monday you can function. That version is medicine. There's also a version of staying home that's slow erosion. The version where the people you'd actually want to see have stopped texting because you've said no for 9 months straight. And now the quiet in the house isn't peace anymore, it's just absence. That version costs you years. What separates those two versions has nothing to do with whether you went out. It comes down to whether anyone in your life still has access to you. You can be the biggest homebody on your block and still be deeply connected if you've kept 1 or 2 people who can show up at your door without a calendar invite. You can also be out 4 nights a week and dying inside, surrounded by people who don't actually know what's good. Wrong with your mom. Connection gets measured in who knows the real answer to, "How are you?" not in reservations. So the question isn't, should I leave the house more? The question is, of the people I love, how many of them have current information about my actual life? If the number is 0, the house has stopped being a refuge and started being a hiding place. If the number is 1 or 2, you're fine. Stay in. Order the food. The couch is doing its job. Now let me give you the reframe, because this is the part I think you've been waiting for someone to say out loud. There's a body of psychology research that looks at solitude preference, people who genuinely, deeply prefer their own company and their own space. And the finding is not what the culture trained you to expect. A lot of them score higher on self-awareness. They have a clearer sense of what drains them and what fills them. They're better at noticing small shifts in their own mood. They've done the unglamorous work of figuring out the conditions they actually function in. Psychologists have a term for this: person-environment fit. The idea that mental health isn't just about you, it's about whether you've matched yourself to the surroundings that actually let you operate. And for a lot of you, after 50-something years of being the one everybody leans on, the surroundings that let you operate happen to have your bed in them. What you're calling a problem might just be a fit. The thing the culture won't tell you is that the homebody version of you, in your 40s and 50s, might actually be the most accurate version of you that's ever existed. The one in your 20s was performing because she had to. The one in your 30s was performing because the kids needed school friends and the job needed FaceTime. The one now, the one who answers the Friday text with, "I love you, can't tonight, rain check," is the one who finally knows what the body costs and what the bank costs and what the silence is worth. So when somebody, your sister, your old college friend, that one coworker who calls everybody antisocial, gives you a hard time about not coming out, you don't owe them a defense. You don't have to explain perimenopause. You don't have to itemize your caregiving hours. You don't have to apologize for being a person whose nervous system finally got a vote. What you do owe, to yourself, not to them, is the honest check. Once a month, maybe. Pick a person. Text them something real, not a meme, a sentence about your actual week. Let them text you something real back. That's the dose. That's the cigarette equivalent in reverse. That tiny thread is what keeps the house a home instead of a bunker. You don't have to leave to stay connected. You just can't disappear. The Friday night no isn't the problem. The problem would be if there was nobody left who noticed the no anymore. As long as there's still one person on the other end going, "Okay, next week then," you're fine. You're more than fine. You're doing the most sustainable thing a person carrying your kind of load can possibly do, which is choose the room where you actually recover. The house didn't trap you. The house caught you. Once you can feel the difference between those two things, the guilt about staying in starts to lift. You weren't supposed to be performing for anybody this whole time. You were supposed to be resting. You finally are. Quick thing before I go. Psychology of Gen X came out of doing this channel and realizing all these topics connect into one bigger story about how you got built. So to everyone who was able to get it, or anyone thinking of getting it, thank you for supporting the channel. Genuinely. If you're looking to get it for yourself, scan the QR code on screen right now. That's the whole thing. The video on the screen, that's your next one.